Hey guys, tonight we travel back in time to the sun-baked lands of ancient Persia, where the blazing desert sun beats down relentlessly, and the idea of keeping anything cold is nothing short of a miracle. Picture yourself trudging through endless dunes under a scorching sky, sweat trickling down your back, and somehow, somewhere, some clever folks have managed to invent the world's first refrigerators. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this kind of heat without their innovations. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, don't be shy, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the heart of ancient Persia, you find yourself surrounded by vast deserts that feel like a giant oven cranked up to the max. The sun doesn't just rise, it assaults the earth with blistering heat. Day after day, temperatures soar, making survival a sweaty, sticky affair. Yet these early Persians were masters of innovation. They weren't just sitting around complaining about the heat. They were actively looking for ways to cool down, preserve their food, and even enjoy icy treats in the middle of the desert. You probably think ice and refrigerators are modern luxuries, but the Persians had a different plan. The challenge. The desert is unforgiving. No natural glaciers to raid, no snowdrifts to dig into for a cold snack. Yet in a land where summer feels like a continuous sauna session, they found ways to harness nature's cold sources and create a primitive form of refrigeration. It's kind of like inventing a cooling system before you even had electricity. Impressive, right? Historians still argue whether the Persians were the absolute first to figure out refrigeration, but one thing's clear: their desert environment pushed them to develop some of the most ingenious early cooling methods. You can almost hear their creative minds ticking away, thinking, how do we keep things fresh when the sun feels like it's trying to cook us alive? This relentless drive is the seed that sprouted the world's first refrigerators. One mainstream fact to keep in mind: the Persian Empire spanned vast territories with diverse climates, but it was their desert regions, particularly the central and southern parts, that demanded the most innovative cooling solutions. And don't forget the quirky side of the story. It's said that early Persians might have even mixed ice with rose water to create a refreshing icy treat, a kind of ancient Persian popsicle. Who knew they had their own version of the ice cream truck? As you imagine this desert life, feel the hot sand beneath your feet, the dry air prickling your skin, and the overwhelming need for cold relief. This pressing necessity sparked one of humanity's earliest quests to control temperature, leading to inventive structures, harvesting mountain ice, and clever use of natural phenomena. So next time you reach for the fridge, remember the Persians were battling the desert heat thousands of years ago, inventing ways to bring coolness to a world that seemed designed to roast everything in sight. Their story isn't just about ice. It's about human ingenuity in the face of harsh reality, turning nature's limited cold resources into something extraordinary. You're now hiking up rugged slopes where the crisp mountain air offers a reprieve from the sweltering plains below. The Zagros and Alborz mountain ranges rise majestically, capped with snow that seems like a distant frozen dream to those living in the desert below. These snowy peaks were the ancient Persians' secret treasure troves of cold, the natural refrigerators waiting patiently for discovery. Imagine trekking these steep paths, carrying fragile blocks of ice down to the villages, careful not to lose precious chill on the journey. Snow and ice were far more than just seasonal curiosities. Persians knew how to harvest these frozen gems in winter and store them for the blistering summer months when the heat could turn a loaf of bread into a crispy, crumbly mess within hours. In fact, they developed an entire system of ice gathering and preservation, essentially the ancient equivalent of your local supermarket's frozen aisle, but much more hands-on and heroic. This harvesting wasn't just a casual grab and go. Persians built special pits or dug deep holes on mountain slopes called ice pits, where snow compacted naturally turned into ice over time. Thus pits acted like giant ice boxes insulated by earth and stone. Ice blocks were carefully cut and transported sometimes at night when the air was cooler to prevent premature melting. The logistical challenge alone sounds exhausting, like trying to keep an ice cube from melting in a boiling pot. A quirky tidbit here: some accounts suggest that Persians would pack the ice with straw or other insulating materials to slow melting. It's kind of like wrapping your ice cream cone in a napkin to stop it dripping, but on a much grander scale. Historians still argue whether the efficiency of these ice pits was truly revolutionary, or if similar methods were being independently developed in other ancient mountain cultures at the time. But why all this effort? Because ice wasn't just a luxury. It was essential for preserving food, cooling drinks, and even medical uses. The wealthy elite enjoyed icy desserts and refreshing drinks that felt like liquid magic in the heat. This elevated ice to a status symbol, a mark of sophistication and power. Transporting ice from the mountains to the desert cities was no small feat. You might picture caravans moving under the moonlight, wrapped carefully in insulating materials, passing through winding mountain trails and hot valleys. It's an epic story of endurance and care that turns simple ice into a precious commodity, much like gold or spices. So as you imagine these ice couriers balancing fragile frozen blocks against a harsh sun, you can appreciate how Persians harnessed their environment's extremes. They turned mountains into natural refrigerators and deserts into markets for cold treasures. This ancient practice laid the groundwork for a more permanent architectural solution, the yakchal, which we'll explore next. You step closer now to one of the most remarkable inventions born of Persia's marriage with ice, the yakchal. Imagine a towering cone-shaped structure rising from the dusty desert floor, its thick walls built to hold winter's precious ice deep into the blazing summer. These ancient ice houses are the world's first refrigerators, and they look almost futuristic, like something dropped from a sci-fi novel into the middle of a sun-baked village. The word yakchal literally means some ice pit or ice house, but it's far more than just a hole in the ground. Picture a vast underground storage chamber shaded from the sun and cooled by thick insulating walls made from a special mortar called saruj, a blend of sand, clay, egg whites, lime goat hair, and ash. This concoction wasn't just for sticking bricks together. It was water resistant and slowed heat transfer like a natural freezer door. Standing beneath the yakchal's conical dome, you feel a surprising coolness that belies the desert heat outside. The dome is engineered with vents that allow hot air to escape and cold air to circulate, creating a passive cooling system long before modern fans or compressors existed. It's a masterpiece of ancient Persian engineering and an early example of sustainable architecture, pretty impressive for a civilization thousands of years old. A quirky fact: some yakchals had small tunnels extending from the main structure called wind catchers, designed to funnel breezes down into the ice chamber. It's like a natural air conditioner, powered by nothing but wind and smart design. Historians still argue whether yakchals evolved independently in Persia or if similar ice houses existed in neighboring regions, but the Persian versions stand out for their sheer scale and longevity. Inside the yakchal, stored blocks of ice brought down from the mountains or harvested during winter snowfalls. These massive ice blocks could last well into the summer months, supplying cold water and food preservation to the community. The chambers also doubled as cool storage for fruits, dairy, and sometimes even wine or other delicacies that would spoil quickly in heat. The yakchal's size varied. Some were modest and served small villages, while others, like the massive one in the ancient city of Karagan, could store enough ice to supply an entire town. Imagine how the villagers must have felt walking into that cool refuge, a literal oasis of cold in a world of relentless heat. This architectural marvel wasn't just functional, it shaped how communities lived and survived. It's no wonder that the yakchal inspired similar ice house designs in other parts of the Middle East and even South Asia centuries later, proving the lasting impact of this early refrigeration technology. So next time you open your fridge, remember the yakchal, a towering cone of ancient ingenuity built from desert earth wind and the dreams of people who refuse to be defeated by the heat. You trace your fingers along the cool, rough surface of the yakchal's thick walls, marveling at the clever choice of materials. These ancient Persians weren't just slapping mud together, they crafted a special kind of clay mortar called saruj, a secret recipe that's part science, part magic. This plaster combined sand, clay, egg whites, lime goat hair, and even ash, making it incredibly water-resistant and insulating. Imagine a glue so good it could keep ice frozen through the hottest days, using nothing but natural ingredients found right there in the desert. The wall thickness alone is mind-boggling, sometimes more than 2 meters wide. It's like wrapping your ice in a thermal sleeping bag, but made of stone and earth designed to block the relentless desert heat. And these walls weren't smooth or plain. Their dome-shaped design helped distribute weight, evenly preventing cracks and damage over centuries. This wasn't just construction, it was a masterclass in ancient engineering. The insulation didn't stop at wall thickness. Persians also cleverly buried the storage chambers underground. Underground spaces naturally stay cooler due to the Earth's thermal mass, creating a temperature buffer from the blazing surface. You might think of it as Mother Nature's built-in refrigerator, enhanced with human ingenuity, a quirky detail. The mortar's recipe included egg whites, a kind of natural binder that added strength and elasticity, somewhat like ancient concrete with a protein twist. Scientists today still study saruj for its durability, and interestingly similar materials are being explored for modern eco-friendly building projects. Historians still argue whether this precise formula was widely known outside Persia or remained a closely guarded secret of Persian masons. As you imagine building a yakchal, consider the sheer amount of labor involved quarrying stone, mixing Saruj-shaping walls that could stand centuries and ensuring perfect insulation. This wasn't just a DIY weekend project. It was a community effort requiring skilled artisans and careful planning. These ice houses were landmarks and points of pride standing tall against the desert sun. Persians also experimented with reflective whitewash on Yakchal domes, which bounced sunlight away and further reduced heat absorption. This detail might remind you of today's white roofs used in hot climates to keep buildings cool, a technique that stood the test of thousands of years. The combination of thick insulated walls, underground chambers, and reflective surfaces created a refrigeration marvel that allowed ice to survive long after winter's snow had melted. It's a testament to how the ancient world could solve practical problems with elegant simplicity well before electricity or modern science. So next time you touch your fridge door, think of the layers of saruj, the deep underground chambers, and the shining white domes, the ancient Persians' recipe for freezing time and conquering the heat. As the sun dips below the horizon and the desert finally cools, you find yourself stepping outside into the crisp night air, a welcome relief after the relentless daytime heat. Ancient Persians knew that the desert nights were a secret weapon in their battle to keep things cold. While the day's furnace-like temperatures tried to undo all their hard work, the nighttime chill offered a natural boost to their refrigeration efforts, a kind of early freezer setting switched on by the earth itself. You can almost feel the temperature drop as you walk through the village. The Persians made the most of this natural phenomenon by timing their ice harvesting and storage activities to coincide with the cool nights. Ice blocks would be moved or stacked in such a way to maximize exposure to the cold night air while being protected from daytime heat. It's like the desert was lending a helping hand, and they were more than happy to take it. One of the coolest nighttime techniques, pun intended, was the use of open-air ice pits, or shallow pools, where ice could be stored under the stars. These pits, were sometimes covered with insulating materials during the day, but left open at night, letting the cold air settle and help preserve the ice. Think of it as nature's own mini-fridge, powered by the lunar cycle and desert winds. This wasn't just about preserving ice. It extended to food storage and cooling water. Villagers would store perishable items outside or in special outdoor cellars that took advantage of the cooler nighttime temperatures. This passive cooling reduced spoilage and kept food fresher, which was crucial in a world without electric refrigeration. Here's a quirky twist. Some scholars suggest that Persians used wet cloths hung in doorways or windows to cool incoming air by evaporation, a precursor to modern evaporative cooling systems. Historians still argue whether these techniques were independently developed or influenced by trade and contact with neighboring cultures. But it's clear that the nighttime desert environment was integral to their cooling strategies. The desert night didn't just preserve ice and food, it shaped daily life rhythms. People adjusted their work and social activities to avoid the heat, waking early or staying up late when temperatures were bearable. The chill of the night air became a natural communal relief, an ancient version of Netflix, and chill minus the Netflix. As you feel the cool desert breeze brush your skin, you can appreciate how the Persians turned the desert's extremes to their advantage. By embracing the natural temperature swings, they extended the life of their ice and fresh goods, a clever adaptation that balanced human effort with environmental rhythms. So in the dance of day and night, the desert gave its cold gift in darkness, and the Persians learned to catch it, turning the passage of time itself into a cooling machine. Now imagine standing near a gently flowing stream in the middle of the desert. The water is cool, almost miraculous in this dry, sun-scorched land. Ancient Persians engineered an incredible underground water management system called Connaughts' long sloping tunnels that tapped into mountain aquifers and delivered fresh, cool water miles away to arid settlements. These connaughts weren't just for drinking or irrigation. They became a secret ingredient in Persian refrigeration. The magic. As water flowed slowly through these underground channels, it remained cool, shielded from the sun's roasting rays. This naturally chilled water was a crucial resource for cooling food and ice, and it also powered evaporative cooling methods. The idea was simple. The evaporation of water absorbs heat, lowering the temperature of the surrounding air. Persians harnessed this effect cleverly to create a breeze of cool air in certain spaces, like inside yakchals or storage areas. You can almost feel the refreshing splash of Connaught water trickling over stone, its coolness a sharp contrast to the desert's heat. This was more than just clever engineering. It was a lifeline. The combination of connaughts and evaporation turned scarce water into a vital cooling tool that complemented ice storage, extending its life and preserving perishables longer. A quirky detail, some Persian homes were designed with malas, small pools, or fountains connected to connaughts that cooled incoming air via evaporation before it entered living spaces, essentially ancient air conditioning systems. Historians still argue how widespread these cooling architectural features were, and whether their design was inspired by similar systems in Egypt or Mesopotamia, but there's no doubt Persians perfected and popularized them. Beyond comfort, the cooling effects of connaughts and evaporative systems played a role in food preservation, especially for dairy and fruits, which spoil quickly under heat. The cool, moist air inside connaught tunnels or near water features slowed decay, helping communities keep their food supplies fresh during scorching summers. You might also appreciate the environmental wisdom here. No electricity, no chemicals. Just smart use of natural water flow and physical principles. It's a sustainable refrigeration method that modern green architecture could learn from, especially as we look for energy-saving cooling solutions. So next time you sip water on a hot day, picture those ancient connaughts flowing silently beneath the earth, carrying cool, life-giving water, and ushering in a breath of chilly air, a hidden artery of coolness powering Persian refrigeration. Imagine you're standing in a bustling ancient Persian market, surrounded by the aroma of spices and fresh fruits. Among the vibrant stalls, you notice something remarkable: food kept cool and fresh despite the scorching heat. Refrigeration wasn't just about ice and yakchals. It was about preserving the very essentials of daily life. The Persians had a deep understanding of food preservation and refrigeration's role in sustaining their community. The types of foods stored and cooled were varied fresh fruits like pomegranates and melons, dairy products such as yogurt and cheese, and even meats prepared for short-term storage. Keeping these foods from spoiling was vital, especially in a time without modern preservatives or refrigeration. Ice and cool storage made it possible to enjoy seasonal foods year-round and avoid the dangers of foodborne illnesses. Persian cooks and merchants mastered clever preservation techniques that complemented refrigeration. Salting, drying, and fermenting were common, but the addition of cold storage took preservation to a new level. Imagine yogurt kept cool in a yakchal, maintaining its creamy texture and tanginess far longer than it could have otherwise. It was a culinary game changer. A quirky fact: some sources suggest that ancient Persians may have used ice to chill wine and other beverages, making early cocktails that were probably the highlight of any feast. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or limited to elite circles, but the idea of icy drinks in a desert empire is tantalizing. Preservation wasn't just practical, it influenced Persian culture and cuisine. Having reliable refrigeration meant that communities could store surplus food, reduce waste, and enjoy a richer variety of meals. It also allowed for the transportation of perishables over longer distances, connecting markets and enhancing trade. Think of the connection to modern refrigeration. Now, this ancient system was the backbone of food security, just like today's fridges and freezers. Without these cooling techniques, the luxury of fresh food in the Persian desert would have been impossible, turning meals into a daily gamble against spoilage. So the next time you bite into a juicy fruit or savor chilled yogurt, remember how ancient Persian refrigeration paved the way for these simple pleasures, transforming desert life into something a little cooler and a lot more delicious. As you wander through the Persian landscape, it's impossible to ignore the role of architecture in their refrigeration story beyond just the yakchals. Persian homes, bazaars, and public baths incorporated cooling designs that complemented the ice storage efforts, creating microclimates that felt refreshingly cool against the harsh desert heat. One standout feature is the wind catcher, or bad gear tall towers, designed to catch the slightest breeze and funnel it down into buildings. You can almost hear the soft whistle of air being sucked through these ancient air conditioners, cooling living spaces naturally without a single watt of electricity. These structures worked hand in hand with underground water channels and ice storage, circulating cooler air and reducing temperatures indoors. Wind catchers were often paired with water pools or fountains inside courtyards, creating evaporative cooling effects. The breeze passing over water cooled dramatically, then flowed through rooms like an ancient spa's air conditioning. The cleverness of this passive cooling system is striking. It's like the Persians had a sixth sense for controlling temperature, blending environment and engineering into one seamless experience. A quirky tidbit: some wind catchers were adjustable with wooden shutters to control airflow depending on the season, closing in winter to keep warmth inside and opening wide in summer to maximize cooling. Historians still debate whether this was a uniquely Persian invention or adapted from older Mesopotamian techniques, but the Persians certainly perfected it to an art form. Public baths, hammams, also utilized these cooling principles. Imagine stepping into a bathhouse where the air feels cool and pleasant, even on the hottest days, thanks to a combination of underground water flow, thick walls, and strategic ventilation. These communal spaces weren't just for hygiene, they were social hubs, cooled by smart design, a testament to how refrigeration ideas permeated Persian life. These architectural innovations show how Persians thought holistically about cooling ice. Storage was one part, but managing air and water in buildings was equally vital. Together, they formed an ecosystem of comfort that made the desert not just bearable, but livable and even enjoyable. So the next time you enjoy a cool breeze indoors or appreciate clever airflow, tip your hat to the Persian wind catchers, silent sentinels of ancient comfort, capturing desert breezes to beat the heat. As dawn breaks over the Persian plains, you find yourself walking toward the outskirts of a bustling city where the elites live in opulent palaces and gardens. Here, refrigeration transcended utility and became a symbol of status and indulgence. The Persian aristocracy loved their icy luxuries, hosting lavish feasts where cold delicacies were the ultimate sign of refinement. Imagine grand banquets with platters of chilled fruits, icy sherbets flavored with rosewater and saffron, and drinks that seemed to melt your thirst away. These were not just culinary treats, but political statements. Serving ice-cold refreshments in a desert empire was a show of power and wealth, the ability to harness nature's extremes and bend them to your will. The elites had dedicated yakhchals and ice houses attached to their palaces, stocked with the season's best ice, brought down from mountains or harvested during winter. These ice caches allowed for the creation of frozen desserts centuries before the invention of the modern freezer. Persian poets even celebrated this icy luxury, weaving it into their verses as a metaphor for purity and pleasure. A quirky fact: some sources claim that ancient Persian kings used crushed ice mixed with fruit juices to create what might be the world's first sorbets enjoyed as early as 400 BCE. Historians still argue the exact origins of these icy treats, but Persia's role in popularizing frozen desserts is undeniable. This obsession with cold luxury influenced architecture too. Some palaces featured underground cooling chambers and water features that kept indoor spaces refreshingly cool. Imagine strolling through a courtyard where the air smells faintly of mint and jasmine, while fountains and cool shadows soften the heat, a personal oasis powered by refrigeration ingenuity. This elite refrigeration culture also trickled down to festivals and public celebrations where icy drinks and chilled sweets marked special occasions. It was a shared cultural experience, blending practical refrigeration with social joy. So as you sip your iced tea or enjoy a frozen dessert today, remember that you're part of a tradition that stretches back millennia one, where ice was more than just cold. It was a taste of power, pleasure, and poetry in the Persian desert. By now you've seen how ice and cooling shaped Persian life, from towering yakhchals to cool palaces. But there's another layer to this story: the winter ice harvest. Imagine braving the cold, rugged mountains far from the desert below, where snow blankets the peaks and winter temperatures turn lakes and rivers to ice. This was the starting point of Persian refrigeration, the annual quest to gather ice before it melted away with the spring sun. Ice harvesting was no small feat. Villagers and workers would hike up to these highlands in the freezing cold, wielding axes and saws to cut giant blocks of ice. You can almost feel their breath fogging in the air, muscles straining against slippery surfaces, the echo of their tools ringing against the mountainside. These massive ice blocks, sometimes weighing hundreds of kilograms, were carefully transported downhill to waiting caravans. This journey was a logistical challenge. Ice had to be moved quickly and efficiently to yakhchals or ice pits before melting. Workers used thick blankets, straw, and insulated carts to protect the precious cargo. It was a race against the sun, and failure meant losing months of refrigeration potential. Here's a quirky detail: some ice blocks were reportedly packed with salt or herbs during transport, which might seem counterintuitive since salt melts ice, but it helped reduce surface melting by controlling moisture and temperature fluctuations. Historians still argue about the exact techniques and whether these practices were widespread or localized traditions. Ice harvesting was deeply communal, a seasonal ritual that united villages. It shaped calendars, social customs, and even local economies. Imagine the anticipation as winter waned and the community prepared to capture and store the fleeting cold, a lifeline for the long, hot months ahead. Beyond practical needs, ice harvesting had cultural significance. It symbolized human triumph over nature's extremes and inspired stories and songs about endurance and ingenuity. So when you think about your freezer's ice cube tray, remember those ancient Persians trekking through snowy mountains, wielding axes, and dreaming of cold drinks under the desert sun. A reminder that refrigeration's roots stretch as far as the mountains themselves. You've felt the chill of the ice harvest and admired the yakhchals, but now let's dive into how the Persians transported their precious ice across vast deserts long before refrigerated trucks or insulated containers existed. Imagine a caravan stretching across endless sand dunes, laden not with spices or silk this time, but massive blocks of ice. This was a logistical ballet requiring ingenuity, timing, and a fair bit of luck with the weather. Persian traders and ice workers used specially designed containers, often made from insulating materials like straw mats, wool, or animal hides, to wrap ice blocks tightly. These wrappings slowed the melting by creating a barrier against the desert heat. Camels, the ships of the desert, carried these cool cargoes, balancing their loads with skill honed by centuries of trade. Caravans traveled mostly at night or early morning to avoid the brutal midday sun, and regular stops allowed workers to douse ice with cool water or bury it temporarily in shaded pits. It was a slow journey measured in days and sometimes weeks, but successful delivery meant communities far from the mountains could enjoy refrigeration benefits. A quirky tidbit: some caravans reportedly used ice shavings mixed with salt to create a primitive form of ice cream or chilled drinks for travelers, a cool comfort on those arduous desert crossings. Historians still argue how common this practice was, and whether it was limited to elite caravans or more widespread. The trade routes that carried ice overlapped with famous Silk Road paths, turning refrigeration into a commodity that linked distant regions economically and culturally. Ice wasn't just a practical resource, it became a luxury good, a symbol of connection between mountains and desert cities. The complexity of this transport system shows how refrigeration in ancient Persia wasn't just a local invention, but part of a broader network of human adaptation and exchange. It's a reminder that even something as simple as ice can carry stories of endurance, cooperation, and innovation. So next time you see a cold drink on a hot day, think of the long, challenging journey it took centuries ago, carried across sands and mountains by those determined to keep the world cool. As your journey through Persian refrigeration continues, you stumble upon the rich tapestries of mythology and symbolism tied to ice and cold in Persian culture. Ice wasn't just a physical element, it carried spiritual and poetic meaning that seeped into art, literature, and folklore. This wasn't merely about survival or luxury, it was about weaving ice into the very fabric of Persian identity. Persian poets often used ice and snow imagery to symbolize purity, clarity, and eternal beauty. Imagine verses comparing the gleam of ice to the soul's purity, or the fleeting nature of snowflakes to life's delicate moments. Ice became a metaphor for cool detachment, emotional clarity, and even the harshness of fate, reflecting the dual nature of the Persian climate, both brutal and beautiful. In folklore, the cold was sometimes personified as powerful spirits or deities controlling winter's grasp. Stories spoke of battles between fire and ice, sun and snow, echoing the real-world struggle between heat and cold in Persian life. These tales shaped how people understood their environment and reinforced the cultural significance of mastering cold through technology like yakchals. A quirky note. Some Persian miniature paintings depict scenes of ice harvesting or winter festivals, mixing realistic details with magical elements like ice creatures or enchanted snow, an artistic celebration of refrigeration's place in society. Historians still debate how much of these depictions reflect real practices versus imaginative storytelling. The symbolic use of ice also influenced Persian architecture and garden design. Cool water features and shaded pools weren't just practical, they evoked a sense of paradise, a cool refuge from the desert's harshness. These gardens of ice and water became metaphors for spiritual refreshment and renewal. Understanding this cultural layer adds depth to the refrigeration story, showing how cold was not only a physical challenge, but also a source of inspiration, myth, and meaning. It reminds you that technology and culture often dance together, shaping how people live and dream. So the next time you see a frozen landscape in art or poetry, remember the ancient Persians who turned ice into both a necessity and a symbol, a cool thread running through their vibrant culture. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself back in the Persian desert, where you observe how refrigeration technology influenced commerce and trade. The ability to store and transport ice and chilled goods revolutionized the Persian economy, creating new markets and connecting distant regions in ways that reshaped daily life. Merchants capitalized on refrigeration to sell fresh fruits, dairy, and meats that would otherwise spoil in the heat. Markets buzzed with activity as vendors proudly displayed cold preserved goods, an attractive commodity that drew buyers from near and far. This access to fresh and chilled products boosted health and nutrition, reducing foodborne illnesses and expanding dietary variety. Refrigeration also played a role in trade fairs and festivals where exotic foods and chilled beverages became highlights of the celebration. Traders from neighboring regions competed to showcase their best preserved products, often transporting ice from mountain harvests to urban centers. This commerce turned ice into a sought-after luxury, driving economic activity and innovation in cooling methods. A quirky detail. Some sources suggest that ice was even traded as a standalone commodity, bartered or sold in blocks at premium prices. Historians still debate how standardized this ice trade was and whether it functioned as an official market or more informal exchange. but it's clear that refrigeration shaped economic patterns. The refrigeration-enabled trade routes also facilitated cultural exchange, spreading culinary techniques, cooling technologies, and even architectural ideas across Persia and beyond. This cross-pollination helped refine refrigeration practices and integrated them into the broader economic and social fabric. Reflecting on this, you realize refrigeration wasn't just about keeping things cold. It was a catalyst for commerce, culture, and connectivity. It shaped where people lived, what they ate, and how they interacted, turning the Persian desert from an isolated environment into a hub of innovation and exchange. So when you enjoy fresh produce from a faraway place, or sip a cold drink on a summer day, remember the ancient Persian merchants who made that possible by pioneering the world's first refrigeration trade networks. You've traveled across deserts, mountains, and bustling markets. But the story of ancient Persian refrigeration wouldn't be complete without exploring its enduring legacy, how these innovations influenced later civilizations and continue to inspire modern technology. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia in the 4th century BCE, he encountered these remarkable ice houses, qanats, and wind catchers. Greek and later Roman scholars documented Persian cooling methods, with awe adopting and adapting them across the Mediterranean. The idea of storing ice in underground pits or insulating ice houses spread through trade and conquest, becoming foundational to refrigeration's evolution. Fast forward through the centuries, and you see echoes of Persian ingenuity in Islamic architecture across the Middle East, where yakhchals inspired similarly designed structures that blend form with cooling function. The principles of evaporative cooling, wind catchers, and qanats shaped urban planning and water management, influencing societies far beyond Persia's original borders. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval European travelers marveled at Persian refrigeration and tried with varying success to replicate it back home using ice houses and early forms of evaporative cooling. Historians still debate how much direct influence Persian methods had on Western refrigeration inventions centuries later, but the parallels are striking. In modern times, engineers and architects studying sustainable design look back to these ancient systems for inspiration. With growing concerns over energy consumption and climate change, Persian refrigeration techniques offer low-energy, eco-friendly cooling strategies that align with today's green building goals. This legacy is a testament to human creativity, how a desert people facing extreme heat and scarce resources crafted a cooling culture that not only preserved food, but preserved itself through time and influence. So as you enjoy the hum of your refrigerator, tonight remember that this modern convenience stands on the shoulders of ancient Persians, whose cool solutions rippled through history and continue to whisper in the breeze of wind catchers and the flow of qanats. As night deepens over the desert, you finally arrive at the quiet, reflective conclusion of this ancient refrigeration journey. You've traced the path from mountain ice harvests to majestic yakhchals, from desert wind catchers to bustling markets, and you've seen how ice was more than just frozen water. It was a lifeline, a luxury, a symbol, and a catalyst for connection across the Persian world. This journey reveals the remarkable ingenuity of a people who refused to be conquered by their environment's extremes. They harnessed physics, nature, and culture to create a cooling system that sustained life and enriched experience long before electricity or modern science. You may have noticed how these innovations weren't isolated inventions, but parts of a complex, interconnected ecosystem of technology, architecture, trade, and tradition. Qanats carried cool water underground, wind catchers funneled breezes, ice houses captured winter's bounty, markets transformed ice into commerce, and poetry turned cold into metaphor. Each thread wove together, producing a tapestry of life perfectly attuned to its climate, a quirky reflection. Imagine ancient Persians chuckling over how their cold storage methods might have inspired modern fridge magnets, or how a yakchal could easily be mistaken for a spaceship by someone from the future. Historians still argue over details, how exactly ice was transported, or how widespread certain cooling techniques were, but the core truth remains ancient. Persia was a cradle of refrigeration. Now, as you prepare to rest, picture that cool desert night air slipping gently through a wind catcher, the distant sound of water flowing through connets, and the silent, patient ice sleeping beneath thick earthen walls. You're connected to a legacy of coolness that spans millennia. The cool night fades slowly around you, softening the edges of the story you've heard. Let the images of ancient Persia's ingenious coolness lull you into calmness, like a gentle breeze brushing against your skin. No matter the heat or chaos of the day, these whispers of frost remind you that human creativity can always carve out a little comfort. Sleep easy, knowing that the art of keeping cool is an ancient gift flowing through time, just as those connets carried their life-giving water beneath the earth.